Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Well, I'm sorry. For your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately. I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of the science of life, have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see that from your book on Thursday night when I was dining with Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
And why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I merely ask for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the wine is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I think it is a rather pleasant state, sir. I have very little experience of it myself, up to the present. I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I'm not sure that I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not a very interesting subject at all. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural, I am sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem, as a class, to have absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Ernest Worthing.
Good morning, Ernest. What brings you to town?
Oh, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
In the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
Who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors.
What nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Shropshire. Yes, of course. Hello, why all these caps? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolen.
Oh, perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm not sure Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your, being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way she flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you would come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is romantic to be in love, but I don't see anything romantic in a definite proposal. Why, it is very romantic to be in love. You see, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe, but then all the excitement is over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce court was specially invented for people whose minds are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there's no speculating on that. Divorces are made in heaven. No, please, don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They're ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you've been eating them all this time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it whole. You behave as if you were married to her already. That is not very good. You see, you are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
May I ask why?
You see, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Well, that's just nonsense.
It isn't. It is actually a great truth. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name Cecily.
Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say that you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no good in offering a large reward, now that the thing is found.
I find it rather mean of you, Ernest, but it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours at all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you've no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read inside a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am quite aware of the fact, and I don't propose to discuss modern culture. It's not the sort of thing one should talk of in private.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a gift from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Charming old lady she is. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
But why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives in Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear Algy, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall. Some aunts are not so tall. That is a matter that surely an aunt may be allowed to decide for herself.
Yes, but why does your small aunt Cecily call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to a dear Uncle Jack. There's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle? I can't quite make it out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Earnest. It's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answered in the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. Here, it's on your cards. It's Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany. I'll keep this as proof if you ever try to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but it does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives in Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd much better have the thing out at once.
My dear Algy, you sound exactly as if you were a dentist. It is very vulgar to sound like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces false impression.
That is exactly what dentists always do. Now, go on, tell me the whole thing. Might I mention, I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of the fact now.
What on earth do you mean?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind to inform me why you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
We'll produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now, go on. Give me your expression. Make it improbable.
My dear fellow, There is nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my house in the country under the charge of our admirable governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That's nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that. I've Bunburyed all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, I don't know whether or not you'll be able to understand my real motives. You are hardly serious enough. When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's duty to do so. And as high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce much to either one's health or one's happiness, to get up to town, I've always pretended to have a younger brother by the name of Earnest, who lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear fellow, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would have a very tedious time if it were either, and modern literature a complete impossibility.
That wouldn't be at all a bad thing.
My dear fellow, literary criticism is not your forte. Don't try it. You should leave that to the people who haven't been to a university. They do so well in the daily papers.
For heaven's sake, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. You see, what you really are is a Bunburist. I was quite right in saying you were a Bunburist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You see, you have invented an invaluable younger brother by the name of Earnest, so that you may come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable younger brother by the name of Bunbury, so I may go down to town as often as I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's dreadful illness, for he's an invalid, then I wouldn't be able to dine with you tonight at Willis's, for I've really been engaged on to Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are so careless about sending out invitations. Nothing offends people more than not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do go down there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and either sent down with either no women at all or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she will place me next to. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her husband across the dinner table. It is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even very decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's own clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be confirmed in the secret Bunburist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If I marry Gwendolen, and indeed she's the only girl I would ever marry, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It is rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do so with Mr. Your invalid friend with that absurd name.
Oh, nothing would induce me to part with Bunbury. You see, if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you'll be very happy to know Bunbury. No man marries without knowing Bunbury. A man has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry Gwendolen, I certainly wouldn't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to understand is that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear friend, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the last 50 years.
Yes, and the happy English home is proved in half the time.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It isn't easy to be anything nowadays, in fact. There's so much beastly competition about. Ah! That must be Aunt Augusta. Only relatives or creditors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so you have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you tonight at Wilson's?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Good, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who aren't serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you are behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Am I not, Mr. Worthing?
You're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now, I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thanks, Mamma. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers at the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir, not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm very distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumber sandwiches. Not even for ready money.
It makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice woman, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I'll have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a great disappointment. But the fact is, I just received a telegram this morning saying that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think that I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Mr. Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury decide whether he's going to live or die. All the shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, though he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvement in his ailment goes. I should be much obliged if you'd ask Mr. Bunbury, from me, to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I require you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season, when everyone has said practically all they've needed to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
I'll talk to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, and I think I can assure you he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, then people don't listen, and if one plays bad music, then people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you will kindly come with me to the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they are improper, and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe is so. Gwendolen, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it is, Miss Fairfax.
Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak with her about.
Gwendolyn, ever since I've met you, I've admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines and has reached the provincial pulpit, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone by the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name weren't Ernest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is. But supposing it was something else.
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, if I could speak quite candidly, I don't care much for the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It's a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolyn, I think there are lots of much nicer names out there. I think Jack, for instance, is a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack's a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. We must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely, you know that I love you, and you led me to believe that you are not absolutely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Gwendolyn.
Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you.
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
One, I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully brown eyes you have, Ernest. They're quite brown. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people watching.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma! I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me. You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be. It is hardly a matter she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I'm making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage.
Mama!
In the carriage, Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn! The carriage!
Yes, Mama!
You may take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Oh, yes. I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England at any rate, it produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I own a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I do not depend on that for my real income. As far as I can make out, the poachers are the only people who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature such as Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I own a house in Belgrave Square. But it is let by the year to Lady Vauxhall. I can get it back whenever I like, of course, at 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays that is no guarantee for respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that can easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us or come in the evenings at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who was your father? He was evidently a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
I'm afraid I don't really know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I told you that I had lost my parents. It would be nearer to the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found.
The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of a very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
Where did this charitable gentleman, who had a first-class ticket for this seaside resort, find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. A somewhat large, black leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew find this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom at Victoria Station?
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is the material. Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion. Has probably indeed been used for that point before now, but would hardly be used as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
May I ask then what you would advise me to do? I need hardly say I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible. To make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't see I could possibly manage to do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has this got to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sake, Algy, stop playing that ghastly tune. Witty fudge you are.
Didn't it go all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know she is always refusing people. It's the way she has. I find it most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she's concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I'm quite sure that she is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, which is rather unfair. I beg your pardon, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge on how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
That is nonsense.
It isn't.
Well, I won't argue with you about the matter. You always want to argue about things.
That is exactly what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think that Gwendolyn has any chance of becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does. That is his.
Is that clever?
It is, as any observation in civilized life should be.
I'm sick to death of cleverness. Everybody's clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It's become an absolute public nuisance. I wish to goodness we had a few fools left.
We have.
We have? I should extremely like to meet them. What do they talk about?
The fools? About the clever people, of course.
What fools?
By the way, have you told Gwendolyn about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one should talk of to a nice, sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What extraordinary ideas you have about the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to love her, if she is pretty, and someone else if she is plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? About the prophet?
Oh, before the end of the week, I shall have got rid of him. I'll say, he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but, my dear fellow, it's hereditary. It's the kind of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say a severe chill.
You're sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well, then. My poor brother Earnest is carried off suddenly, in Paris, by a severe chill. There, that gets rid of him.
But I thought you said this Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Earnest. Won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, Cecily's not a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks and pays no attention whatsoever to her lessons.
I would rather like to see this, Cecily.
I will take very good care. You never do. She's excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty ward who is just 18?
My dear fellow, one does not blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to become extremely good friends. I'll bet you anything that half an hour after they have met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that once they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we want to get a good table at Willis's, we really must go and dress. Do you know it is nearly 7?
It's always nearly 7.
Well, what shall we do after we go to dinner? Go to a theater?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to a club.
No, I hate talking.
What if we trot around the Empire around 10?
Oh no, I loathe looking at things. It is so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing.
I hate doing nothing, although I don't really mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Gwendolyn, I don't think I can really allow this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that.
Gwendolyn, darling. Gwendolyn, darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression of Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Whatever influence I ever had on Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose? It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
What?
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thank you, I already have.
You may also ring the bell.
You will let me see you to your carriage, my own darling.
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane?
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I probably won't be back till Monday, but, you can put out all my dress clothes, the smoking jackets, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope today will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you're such a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
Mary's a sensible, intellectual girl. The only girl I ever cared for in my life. What on earth are you so amused at?
I'm a little anxious about my poor friend Bunbury, that is all.
If you're not careful, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
That's nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know quite well that I look perfectly plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always seems to lay stress on your German as he is leaving for town.
Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes he is so serious that I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the very best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is one to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know of no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I believe that...
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember that poor unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I know you certainly would. You know German and geology, and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I'm not sure even I could produce such an effect on a character that, according to his own brother, is so irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure I would even desire to reclaim him. I'm not in favor of this modern mania of turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. As a man sows, so shall he reap. You really must put away your diary, Cecily. I don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I shouldn't write them down, I'd probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is a diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly happen. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all of the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems very unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was unfortunately abandoned. I use the word in sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child. These speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll through the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
I know that, Miss Prism, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. In fact, I was thinking about that and not about my German lesson when the rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
This is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, hasn't returned from town yet.
We did not look for him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He is not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man, his brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I shall see you both, no doubt, at evensong?
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it some good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far to the schools and back.
That would be a delight. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid, horrid German.
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven up from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Uncle Jack was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Fairfax were in the garden. He said he was very anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Pray ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come out here, please.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any truly wicked person before. I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everybody else. He does.
You are my cousin Cecily, my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some strange mistake. In fact, I believe that I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily, and you, I see from your card, are my cousin Ernest, Uncle Jack's brother. My wicked cousin Ernest.
My dear Cecily, you mustn't think that I am wicked. I am not really wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked, but being very good the whole time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention it, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, but I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I don't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back until Monday afternoon.
That is a great disappointment. I am obliged to go by the first train on Monday. I have a business appointment that I'm anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Well, I know, of course, how important it is to not keep a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of beauty in life. But I still think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. He's gone up to buy your outfit.
I certainly wouldn't let Jack buy me an outfit. He has no taste in neckties at all.
I don't think you'll require neckties. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have heard of the next world in Australia have not been particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I am not that. Which is why I want you to reform me. You will make me your mission, if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You're looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me. I forgot that when one wants to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetites unless I have a buttonhole first.
A Marichal Niel?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think you should talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Who? Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would love to be caught in.
I don't think I should care to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The practice as well as the precept of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you must realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is the man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools and back.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
I returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance?
Still leading his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest is dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer my sincere condolence. At least you have the consolation of knowing that you were the most forgiving and generous of the brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. He died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I got a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel yesterday afternoon.
Was the cause of the death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, Miss Prism, charity. No one is perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to droughts. Will the intimate take place here?
No. He seems to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish for me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of manna in the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and festal days. The last time I delivered was in the cathedral on behalf of a charity sermon on the prevention of disconnect among the upper orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me. You mentioned christenings, I think, Dr. Chasuble. I suppose you know how to christen, all right?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant practices in this parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But, Mr. Worthing, is there a particular infant whom you are interested in? Your brother was unmarried.
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear doctor. I'm very fond of children. No, the fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely you've been christened already.
I remember nothing about it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
I certainly intend to have. Of course, I don't know if the thing would bother you in any way. Or you think I'm a little too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. The sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed that I find advisable. Our weather is so changeable. At what hour you wish the ceremony be performed?
Oh, I trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly. I have 2 similar ceremonies to perform that day. A case of the twins that occurred on one of the outlying cottages on your estate. Poor Mr. Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't see much fun in being christened along with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now I will no longer trod in the house of sorrow any longer. I merely beg that you not be too bowed down by sorrow, for what seems as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I'm so pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily.
My child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you'd had a toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother.
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived about half an hour ago.
What nonsense. I haven't got a brother.
Uncle Jack, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. And you will, I'll go tell him to come out here. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are joyful tidings.
After we had all been accustomed to his loss, his sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother's in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it is perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I'm terribly sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you aren't going to refuse your own brother's hand?
Nothing would induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful, and he knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is much good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And surely there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by the bed of pain.
Oh, he's been talking about Bunbury, has he?
Yes. In fact, he told me all about Mr. Bunbury in his terrible state of health.
Bunbury? Oh, I won't have to talk to you about Bunbury, or about anything else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
I admit the faults were on my side, but I must say, Brother John's coldness to me seems to be peculiarly hurtful, especially considering it is the first time I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never, never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
It is pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation. I think we should leave the 2 brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Prism. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, my child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
You young scoundrel, Algie. You've got to leave immediately. I don't allow any Bunbury here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage. I've unpacked it and put it into the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket. I'm afraid I can't stay more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I have not been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
What a fearful liar you are, Jack. I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman has never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can certainly understand that.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly disgraceful in them. Why don't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in mourning for a man who is actually staying for a whole week with you in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You've got to leave by the 4-5 train.
I certainly won't leave you while you are in mourning. I would find it very unfriendly. If I were in mourning, I'm sure you would stay with me. I would find it very unkind if you didn't.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, if you are not too long. I've never seen anyone take so long to change and such little result.
Well, at any rate, that is better than always being overdressed, as you are.
If I'm occasionally a little bit overdressed, I make up for it for being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage, and your presence in my garden is utterly absurd. You've got to leave, and I hope you have a pleasant journey back to town. This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we've got to part.
I'm afraid so. It's a very painful parting.
It is always very painful parting from people whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from anyone whom one has just met is almost unbearable.
Thank you. The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, miss. Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. Indeed, if you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? Do let me read it, please.
Oh, no, I couldn't possibly. You see, it is very simply a young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I do hope you will order a copy. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You may go on. I'm quite ready for more. Oh, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, Ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should say you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly just doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily. The dog cart is waiting, sir. Tell it to come around next week at the same hour. Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I care about you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for 3 months.
For 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
You see, ever since Uncle Jack first told us that he had a wicked brother who was very wicked and you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is very much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
But when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of February last, worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you under this dear old tree here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name, in this little bangle with the true lover's knot that I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
Oh, you need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I always wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I had broken off our engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
But was the engagement ever broken off?
Of course it was. On the 22nd of March. You can see the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
But what had I done? I had done nothing at all. I'm quite disappointed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would have hardly been a serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
Of course, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
But you'll never break off our engagement again?
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, there is still the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
Don't laugh at me, darling. But it's always been a girl's dream of mine to love someone whose name was Ernest. There's something in that name that inspires an absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't quite like the name of Algernon.
But I don't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not a bad name. In fact, it's a rather aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court have the name of Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algy, you could not love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your character, but I fear that I could never give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here, I suppose, is well practiced in the rites and ceremonials of the church?
Oh, Dr. Chosball is a most learned man. He has never written any books, so one can only imagine how much he knows.
Then I think I must leave on an important christening. On an important business.
Oh.
I shan't be away for more than half an hour.
Considering that we've been engaged since the 14th of February, and that I've only met you today for the first time, I feel it is rather hard of you to leave me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must enter his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. He shouldn't be gone long. And do bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose that's one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack in some of his philanthropic work. I don't quite like women who are interested in philanthropic work. It is very forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've just met each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. And certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. In fact, I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really?
Yes.
Your mother, no doubt, or some other relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, along with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that ever since I knew you were Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish that you were, well, not quite as young as you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I believe that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He's the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history supplies us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so indeed, history would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Yes, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm afraid they haven't been on good terms for quite a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you've lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come across a friendship like ours, would it not? Of course, you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolen, I see no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. A little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My darling Cecily, I'm afraid there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
You must be under some strange misconception. You see, Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dearest Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never approach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into this engagement? This is not the time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say I've never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres are widely different.
Shall I light tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh, yes. A great many, Miss Fairfax. From the top of one of the hills quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that's why you live in a town.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country, if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, this is what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering very much from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you, detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
Hand that to Miss Fairfax.
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you've given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Oh! Ernest! My own Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to be married to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some misunderstanding. The gentleman whose arm is present round your waist is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh.
Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you engaged to be married to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, Gwendolyn. I mean Gwendolyn.
Of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I felt there was some slight misconception, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But it certainly is John. It has been John for years.
I'm afraid a gross deception has been practiced on the both of us.
My poor wrong Cecily.
My sweet, wounded Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been reduced to such a painful position, and I'm quite inexperienced in doing anything of the kind. However, I will tell you that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all, and I certainly not have the smallest intention of having a brother in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
Not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear, Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to follow us there.
No. Men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what is called bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. One of the most advanced Bunburys I've ever had in my life.
You've no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Good heavens.
Well, one must be serious about something if they want to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunburying. What you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have an absolutely trivial nature.
Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You wouldn't be able to go down to the country quite so often as you would like. And a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, Jack? You won't be able to run up to town as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
conduct towards Miss Cardew. I say, you're taking a nice, sweet, refined girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense for your deceiving a brilliant, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I am in love with Gwendolen.
And I'm in love with Cecily. I adore her.
Well, there is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I can see no possible explanation for you and Miss Fairfax being united.
That is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties.
That is nonsense. How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins when we're in this horrible trouble? I can't quite make it out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One must always eat muffins calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything but food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way.
Why don't you have tea cake instead? I don't like tea cake.
I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But I thought you had just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you. And under the circumstances, that is a very different thing.
Yes, but muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go. I haven't had my dinner yet. That is absurd. You see, no one goes anywhere without having their dinner. Only people like vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you drop this nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30. And I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. Besides, we can't be both christened Earnest. It's absurd. I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence whatsoever that I've ever been christened by anyone. And I think it extremely probable I never was. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It's entirely different in your case. You've been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened in years.
Yes. But you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. You see, I know my constitution can stand it. I really must say, I think it is quite dangerous you're venturing on this now. It might make you unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very nearly close to you is carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
You yourself said a severe chill was not hereditary.
Oh, it used to be, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
That is nonsense.
Jack, you are at the muffins again. I told you, I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow tea cake to be served up for your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algy, I've already told you to go. Why don't you go?
I haven't finished my tea yet, and there are still some muffins left.
The fact that they did not follow us at once into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show they have some sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
But I haven't got a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to produce an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolyn, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
That certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might have every opportunity of coming up to town to see me?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. This is not the time for German skepticism. The explanations do appear to be quite satisfactory, especially Mr. Worthing's. His seems to have the stamp of truth upon it.
More than content with what Mr. Moncrief said. His voice alone inspires one with absolute credulity.
Then you think we should forgive them?
Yes. I mean, no.
True. I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. Which of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time for me? Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal?
I am.
How absurd a talk of the equality of the sexes, where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned. Men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing. Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bruckner.
Good heavens.
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Come here. Sit down. Sit down immediately. Hesitation of any kind is a sign of mental decay in the young, of physical weakness in the old. Apprise, sir, my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I followed her at once by a luggage train. Her unhappy father is under the impression, I am glad to say, that she's attending a more than usually lengthy lecture by the University Extension Scheme on the influence of a permanent income on thought. I do not propose to undeceive him. Indeed, I've never deceived him in any question. I would consider it wrong. But of course you'll clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I'm engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You nothing of the kind. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury? Oh, no, Bunbury is somewhere else at the present. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. I mean, Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Bunbury? Oh, he was quite exploded.
Exploded! Was he the victim of a revolutionary outrage? I was not aware that Mr. Bunbury was interested in social legislation. If so, he is well punished for his morbidity.
No, Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live, and so Bunbury died.
He seems to have had a great confidence in the opinion of his physicians. I'm glad, however, that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action and acted under proper medical advice. Now that we have finally got rid of this Mr. Bunbury, may I ask, Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that goes on seems to be considerably above the proper average the statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all connected with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were any families or persons whose origin was a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory, but three addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity?
I have carefully preserved the court guides of the period. They were open to your inspection, Lady Bracknell.
I have known strange errors in that publication.
Their family solicitors are Messrs. Markby, Markby, and Markby.
Markby, Markby, and Markby, a firm of the very highest position in their profession. Indeed, I'm told that one of the Mr. Markbys is occasionally to be seen at dinner parties. So far, I'm satisfied.
How extremely kind of you, Lady Bracknell. I also have in my possession, you'll be glad to hear, certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, baptism, whooping cough, registration, vaccination, confirmation, and the measles. Both the English and German variety.
A life card with incident, I see. They're perhaps somewhat too money for a young girl. I'm not myself in favor of premature experiences. Come, dear. The time approaches for our departure. We've not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, may I ask you if Miss Cardew has any little fortune?
Oh, about £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £130,000. And in the funds? Miss Cardew seems to me a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few girls of the present day have any really solid qualities. Any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Come here, dear. Yes, quite as I expected. Your dress is sadly simple, and your hair looks almost as if nature might have left it. But we could soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a really marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, dear. No, the side view is what I want. Yes, quite as I expected. There are distinct social possibilities in your profile. The two weak points in our age are its wants of principle and its wants of profile. The chin a little higher, dear. Style largely depends on the way the chin is worn. They're worn very high just at present. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the prettiest, dearest, sweetest young girl, and I don't care twopence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully about society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, of course you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on, but I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I never dreamed for a moment of allowing that to stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
You may also address me as Aunt Augusta for the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
I'm not myself in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but I am Miss Carter's guardian, and she cannot legally marry until she comes of age.
Come here, dear. How old are you?
I'm really only 18, but I admit to 20 at evening parties.
You are perfectly right in making some slight alteration. 18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties? Now, it will not be long before you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I do not think that your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any importance.
I feel bound to tell you, Lady Bracknell, that according to the terms of the old Mr. Thomas Cardew, Cecily does not legally come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. London society is full of women of the highest birth who have, by their own free choice, remained 35 for years. Lady Dumbleton is an instance in point. To my knowledge, she has remained 35 ever since she arrived at the age of 40, which was many years ago now. I see no reason why our dear Cecily will not be still more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algie, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course, Cecily. You know I could.
I know. I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate waiting 5 minutes for anything. It always makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
And what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to show a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be quite aware that what you propose is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
This is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Come, dear, we have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more might expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed an immediate desire for christening.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses. Lord Bracknell will be highly displeased if he learned that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand that there are to be no christenings this afternoon?
I don't think that, as things are now, it would be much of practical value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I'm very disappointed to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. They savor of the heretical views of Anabaptists, views that I've refuted in my foreign published sermons. But, however, as your mood seems to be one of peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I've just been informed by the pew opener that Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry for over half an hour.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell. I'm on my way to join her.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect remotely connected with education?
She's the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell, has been for the last 3 years Miss Carter's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Ken. I have been waiting there for you for an hour and 3/4.
Prism? Come here, Prism. Prism? Where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Bayswater. It contains the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of the more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I simply ask where you left the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
Which railway station?
Victoria. The Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwen, wait for me here.
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I do not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds as if he were having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They're always vulgar and often convincing.
It has stopped now.
I wish he would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully. The happiness of more than one life depends on your answer.
It seems to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here is the stain on the lining, caused by the explosion of a temperance beverage, an incident that occurred at Leamington. And here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I had had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I am delighted to have it so unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more was restored to you than that handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, Mother.
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I do not deny. That is a serious blow. But who has the right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot an act of repentance wipe out an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is a lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid that the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother. Then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. Cecily, have I not always told you I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel. You will have to treat me with more respect in the future.
Well, not till today, old boy, I admit, but I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens. I'd quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose.
I'll never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when I was found in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is cleared up. But what name was I given?
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was the result of Indian climates and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind.
Algy, can't you recall my father's Christian name?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army list of that period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta.
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I have no doubt that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. And generals. Malum, Moxbum, Magley. What ghastly names they have. Moxbum, Markby, Moncrief. Lieutenant to 1840. Colonel, Captain, General. Christian names. Ernest John. Gwendolyn, I've always told you my name was Ernest. And it is. Naturally, it is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the general was called Earnest. I know I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a very terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he's been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel that you are sure to change.
Letissa!
Friedrich, at last!
Cecily, at last!
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.